Ghost Recon Breakpoint's problems are a result of the Far Cry problem, best put on display by that franchise's newest release. From the moment New Dawn was announced, everyone was saying the same thing. Far Cry New Dawn looks like it's pulling an Assassin's Creed. Some people are going to hate that and others are going to love it, but Far Cry is in a tough spot. Far Cry is a series that has seen a whole hell of a lot of entries. If you include Far Cry New Dawn and Blood Dragon, there's been 7 entries over the past 3 generations. And yet, the franchise has changed dramatically over the past 2 entries alone. Did everyone love coming down with malaria in Far Cry 2? No. But Far Cry's offerings have made up a suite of menu options so varied and at times unique that it makes the menu at McDonald's look like a limiting set of nonsense. But in the process of this evolution, Far Cry has also created a bit of a problem for itself. Ubisoft wants desperately to milk its franchises, getting as many releases out as possible, but at what cost? Why is Ghost Recon, Assassin's Creed, and now Far Cry all beginning to share far too much in common? Well, that question is actually best answered with Far Cry New Dawn. So let's unpack the Far Cry dilemma. Far Cry New Dawn was a surprising announcement, a post-nuclear apocalypse Far Cry game that directly succeeds a previous entry. These were all new concepts for the franchise. But New Dawn is Far Cry Primal, but a bit more, admittedly. In what way? Well, a lot. Ubisoft has stated on a multitude of occasions that they like the idea of annualization. We are able to offer games every year because people want them every year. As long as this is true, it would be very stupid not to satisfy that need. That is a direct quote from at the time Ubisoft's own Lionel Renaud. Money comes quick when you can get product out every year. Ubisoft saw an opportunity with Far Cry 5. They had a game that was reasonably well received and a game that sold quite well. It's also huge. So, they can either rest on their laurels or make more. Far Cry New Dawn is a new Far Cry game that's set in Hope County, on the very same map you played on in 5. What's changed? Well, parts of the map have changed. It looks a little different after all. It's gone through an apocalypse, but it's still the very bright, colorful Hope County you know and maybe even love. The enemies here are now Mad Max-style highwaymen, and the world is undergoing a super bloom as plant life regenerates rapidly. Far Cry 5 to New Dawn, there has been an 11-month lapse in time in those 2 releases. Ubisoft was able to get this game done and out in less than a year, while also releasing an entire season pass's worth of DLC. Even if this product was planned before the release of 5, that's not a lot of time. Ubisoft Montreal is the dev lead on both games, so how is that possible? Well, it's actually quite simple. I call it the Far Cry Primal Problem, and it's a problem that Ubisoft seems to want to continue with Far Cry New Dawn, and it's one that exists regardless of the game's inevitable quality.
It's so easy to use Geico.com, a caveman could do it.
What?
Oh, no,
Not cool.
I did not know you were there. I can change.
Let's talk about the Primal Problem. You know what's really cool? These old cavemen Geico commercials. Turns out you put dirty old dude in a suit is a good marketing move. You know what's not? Being the Geico caveman in a video game. Maybe you love Far Cry Primal, I don't. In fact, a good majority of runs the game now. Why? Because it's uninspired. Remember that 11-month turnaround in development for New Dawn? Primal's development turnaround was only 16 months between 4 and the game, and it showed. The game introduced next to nothing new, and in some ways, literally so. Far Cry Primal, much like New Dawn, reuses Far Cry 4's map, repurposes it, and repaints it to be less civilized and more organic. But in the process, they dumbed down gameplay mechanics and toyed with realities that didn't need fixing or changing. This is what it's like to take out an outpost in Far Cry Primal. Just like in Far Cry 4, you scout, you shoot. Except now, for some reason I have a bird to bite people and a leopard to maul the rest. Far Cry Primal's story was, to put it lightly, a chore, and even the gameplay structure was devoid of almost any interesting mission variety, the stuff you normally see in a Far Cry game, as they stripped down gameplay to its most core elements. In Ubisoft's attempt to get a Far Cry game out every year, they sacrificed the creativity and ingenuity that made the mainline games so great in lieu of an easier to develop and far less interesting spin-off. Here's the problem. The game cost $60 at launch, and review outlets still hit it with the good enough label. It wasn't DLC, it wasn't nearly as well made as Far Cry 4, and it still cost $60. Far Cry Blooddragon did the same thing. They repurposed the South Island of Far Cry 3. The difference? That was a $15 DLC, and it was great, creative, and unique. Far Cry New Dawn shares the Far Cry Primal Problem. Ubisoft's insistence on pressing out new Far Cry games every entry and milking 3, 4, and now 5 for everything it's worth, even if the game loses its soul in the process. It is very much Far Cry 5.5. The silver lining here is that New Dawn is not $60, it's $40, and it changes a whole lot, maybe for the better. But for better or for worse, it attempts to introduce a new status quo for Far Cry that is dramatically different. These changes are going to make some people very happy and some very angry.
You're giving me the "it's not you, it's me" routine? I invented "it's not you, it's me." Nobody tells me it's them, not me. If it's anybody, it's me.
Assassin's Creed Odyssey is an RPG. Through and through, the game revolves around loot and numbers. Tell me, what about that sounds like Assassin's Creed? Remember Ghost Recon? Yeah, this is them now. Ubisoft games have turned into those sponsored web pages on the bottom of crappy websites. Ghost Recon is 18 now and you won't believe what they look like today. That doesn't make them bad games, not at all. In fact, Odyssey is great, but it's lost what made it Assassin's Creed. It's lost an identity. New Dawn is heading down the very same path. New Dawn has turned Far Cry into a full-blown RPG. It's taken the substance of 5 and fallouted it all the way up. It's an immediate difference. Shoot somebody in New Dawn and numbers come flying off their body as their division-like health bar dwindles down. Take on an enemy too high leveled, that's right, enemies have pseudo levels, and suddenly you're dealing with an MMO-light type bullet sponge enemy that simply won't die. How will you handle these enemies? Well, loot, of course. In New Dawn, your weapon's genuinely upgradable. Your arsenal must continually be upgraded. Actually, your weapons are upgraded through 3 tiers and will be able to have its stats changed as you invest in that said weaponry. Better still, you now have a home base. Prosperity. Much like your hub in The Division, or the Tower in Destiny, or a settlement in Fallout, here you can build prosperity from the ground up into a functioning settlement, if you will. This works in conjunction with an expanded buddy system and your typical RPG systems. Far Cry is no longer about shoot first and asking questions later, it's about will this gun work, are they more powerful than me, and what am I getting myself into? New Dawn turns Far Cry into exactly what nearly every Ubisoft game is becoming, an open world, numbers-based RPG, and in this case, one you can even play with your friends. Is this a problem? If the game is great, no. But it's actually fairly easy to dissect why some people aren't happy about the changes. Changes that, by the way, I'm actually optimistic about. But to examine the effect this problem has on the quality of the games, we have to look at the difference between Far Cry 3, 4, and 5 in the context of New Dawn. Voss was awesome, Pagan Min was awesome, all of Hope County's villains were awesome. Ubisoft does an excellent job with evolving their IPs from a character perspective, or at least they're doing an excellent job with most of their games, but specifically with Far Cry. But it's the gameplay evolution that's most intriguing. Far Cry 3 was Ubisoft modernizing the franchise, taking out what it considered baggage and saying, here's an open world, here's a tropical island, here's a band of bros. Do whatever the hell you want. Gone were the systems that it deemed burdensome. You were no longer at risk of contracting malaria, you didn't need to read your map while at risk of being shot by enemies. It was no longer about survival, it was about chaos and mayhem and burning down a field of trees with a flamethrower. It was an absolutely massive leap in both gameplay and systems for the franchise. For a point of reference, here's gameplay from 2 and 3 side by side. Then 4 came along and things changed a bit less. The game still felt almost unbelievably like Far Cry 3 when you picked up 4. Its setting was more varied, its story more cold, but it was still just a slightly upgraded version of 3. It was still a game of chaos. Sure, every once in a while you'd make your way through an annoying stealth section in the mountains, but those were few and far between. Here is Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 4 side by side. Looks a little bit more similar this time, doesn't it? And then came Far Cry 5. It too laid its foundation in a new villain. It added a new cult system that forced you to discover the map in a brand new and organic fashion. It asked you to talk to NPCs to explore its world. In response, it gave you a new buddy system to combat the feeling of isolation you so often felt in the mountains of 4. You got to fly in planes. There was a more expanded RPG and customization system. We got right back to the generational-like leap we had seen from 2 to 3. This was genuinely different in meaningful ways, but most importantly, it finally felt different. Here is Far Cry 4 next to Far Cry 5. These are not the same game, but these annualized middling releases like Far Cry New Dawn and Primal are left in the wake. True innovation becomes impossible as they're built on an already existing foundation, and yet Far Cry New Dawn exists in juxtaposition to that. Primal got a pass because it was a spin-off. It was almost impossible to completely innovate on a game and its mechanics outside of now we have a club and arrows if you're not given the time or even a new engine and a new map to do so. But New Dawn doesn't need a pass. New Dawn attempts to shift and change into something that no other Far Cry game has even attempted to be. And that's interesting because there's not a lot of time to get that done. So where does the future of this franchise lie? Should we be hopeful for Far Cry's future, and why is this change even occurring? What about Assassin's Creed and Ghost Recon? So why is New Dawn becoming everything that we've discussed here? It's easy. Trends and services. I know it's difficult to hear out of context, but the reality is that Assassin's Creed has now become a part of the games as a service trend. The game launches, and it's updated with live elements, new purchasable cosmetic items, and DLC, as well as a community team that keeps its community updated once every single month. There's a reason. The Division generated $330 million of revenue in just 5 days on the market. Destiny 2 generated $500 million in just its first few weeks on the market. Far Cry 5 brought in $310 million in its first week on the market. One of those is not like the others, you think. Far Cry 5. So it's $310 million sounds great, right? Sounds like they've already figured it out. Look deeper. Destiny 2 and The Division continue to generate revenue in the hundreds of millions every single financial quarter for the following 1 to 2 years after that first week. Far Cry 5's revenue falls precipitously from the moment it releases on. That week generates most of its revenue, and then it's time to look forward to the next release and put the game on sale. Games as a service, Ghost Recon, the same. The Division, Far Cry. Ubisoft sees the games that are succeeding. Fallout, Destiny, their own product in The Division. They know that they need to keep people engaged for longer, and the more like an RPG the game is, the more attached people come to their characters, and their weapons, and their cars, and the more likely they are to spend money, real money, on customizing them after the game comes out. They're investing more of their time and energy into it. Let's run a quick thought experiment. How many single-player FPS games can you name that are already out and have come out in the past 2 years that aren't open world, don't include a push to cosmetic customization, and don't include at least 5 gameplay systems you don't see in traditional Western RPGs? The answer, if you can think of one at all, is probably slim from the AAA space. Yes, there are a few, games like Wolfenstein and Prey, but those are very isolated examples. New Dawn is a continuation of this trend, but as every game becomes washed out by these trends, AAA gaming continues to feel like one giant genre fighting to maintain its popularity. Ubisoft is beginning to cannibalize itself with an idea of this game that blends every genre that could possibly be popular at one time into one strange mold. A game that you can play with your friends, but also has loot, and there's gear score, and it's an RPG, and enemies have levels, and there's numbers, and there's side missions, and there's daily activities, and there's monetization. I made a point at the end of my Ghost Recon Breakpoint review that kind of encapsulated this whole thing, but I didn't realize until going back in and processing all of these things one by one, just how bad this is getting at Ubisoft. This was once a publisher that was doing things differently, that was thinking outside of the box, and we have things like Beyond Good and Evil 2 coming soon, but games like Breakpoint are not promising. Yeah, I was out ahead of most reviews. I was one of the first ones out when embargo broke, but slowly that cloud of dust hanging over these games has settled on Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and people have begun to see it for what it really is. A reskinned Assassin's Creed Odyssey, a reskinned Far Cry New Dawn, a reskinned Ghost Recon Wildlands. It is an imitation. It is a form of flattery that no longer flatters anybody but itself. Ubisoft has managed to do more than just annualize its releases, it's managed to make every release exactly the same, and create this ecosystem that does nothing but bounce back and forth across its small pieces, but markets itself so well that it's hard for people not to buy in to exactly what it really is. Emptiness. The Far Cry problem is a AAA problem. The Far Cry problem is a Ubisoft problem. The Far Cry problem is a Ghost Recon problem, an Assassin's Creed problem, a Division problem, and it's not going away. There are plenty of studios doing excellent work, plenty of publishers releasing great games, but it's hard not to wish that Ubisoft could look in the mirror today and see something unique again. That is it for today's video, guys. As always, I want to know what you guys think. Do you like any of these games here? Do you like Ghost Recon Breakpoint? What about Far Cry New Dawn? What about Assassin's Creed Odyssey? Not all of these games are bad. A lot of them have a lot of enjoyment underneath all of this kind of trite nonsense that's stacked on top of it. But I want to know, which of these games is your last straw, if any of them were, and more importantly, which of them do you like the most? Which of them are you most excited about in the future? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you have not yet done so, press subscribe. Also, hit that little bell next to the subscribe button. That way you're actually notified when a video releases, so press subscribe and hit that little bell. And until next time, guys, I'm out.